A Second Chance at Love. Previous episodes are available in playlist, a link is given in the video description. Episode 25. Roxanne immediately refuted that. I think you got it wrong. We're mere acquaintances and are not close. Cassandra raised an eyebrow and decided to try her luck. In that case, can we switch our groupings for the play? She asked, harboring hope that Roxanne would say yes and she could partner with Lucian instead. Although she hoped to hook up with Lucian, even if she failed, she would still be happy to have a hunk like Lucian as her prince in the play. Roxanne was excited by Cassandra's proposal. However, recalling Jeffrey's words, she had her doubts. Can we still make a switch now? She asked, looking uncertain. Cassandra could tell Roxanne was agreeable, so she nodded her head excitedly and said, so long as we're both agreeable, I don't see why not. All we have to do is inform Ms. Ward about our decision. Roxanne was hopeful and nodded in agreement. Jeffrey could not accommodate her request for a switch earlier as he would have difficulty coordinating the change with other parents. However, since Cassandra initiated the switch and both of them were agreeable, she did not think Jeffrey and Pippa had any reasons to object. After reaching a consensus with Cassandra, the two ladies went back to their own seats. They planned to inform Pippa of their agreement later. Archie and Benny led Roxanne to their seats, and her jaws dropped when she saw where their seats were. She had no idea the boys were seated next to Estella. That meant she had to take a seat next to Lucian. Mommy, the boys gingerly nudged her when they saw her dazed and rooted to the spot, with no intention of sitting down. Roxanne snapped out of her shock, gave the boys a forced smile, and sat down awkwardly, her body tensed. I see Ms. Jarvis is really popular. Didn't know you're so chummy with the other parents, Lucian sarcastically said. Roxanne frowned slightly, puzzled by his mocking. She turned toward him and saw him looking stonily at Cassandra. Cassandra noticed his gaze was on her, and she blushed. Lucian furrowed his brow in disdain and looked away. Roxanne gave him a wry smile and said, if you are referring to that lady, then it is all thanks to you, Mr. Farwell. Lucian's gaze darkened upon hearing her rebuke. He knew she would not bother to explain even if he asked, so he left it as it was. At that moment, Pippa came into the classroom with a parent who arrived late. After settling everyone down, she did a head count and was pleased to see a full attendance. She smiled and said, since everyone is here, let's begin our discussion on the scripts for the plays. Before the discussion could commence, Roxanne hurriedly stood up and said, Ms. Ward, Ms. Clark, and I would like to switch groups. Everyone was dumbfounded. They could not understand why she would give up on a terrific partner like Lucian and request to switch. Pippa looked toward Lucian, hoping to get a hint of his opinion on that matter. Lucian was frowning, and there was indignation in his eyes. Estella, on the other hand, was anguished. Pippa understood how Lucian felt, and she was put in a difficult position. She turned to Roxanne and tried to change her mind. Ms. Jarvis, the groups had been finalized. Moreover, Archie and Benny got along well with Estella, so. Roxanne was a little swayed, but she hardened her heart and insisted, I've discussed with Ms. Clark, and she's agreeable. When Estella heard that Roxanne wanted to switch to another group for the play, she pouted in distress and looked to her daddy for help. Lucian appeared emotionless, but his mouth was tensely shut. Although he did not say anything, it was obvious he was pissed. Before he made his way to the kindergarten that morning, he told himself he would avoid getting into a disagreement with Roxanne. However, when he saw she was adamant about switching groups with Cassandra, he couldn't help but get furious. Estella suddenly recalled what Lucian had told her the night before. He had told her he would need her help to mend their relationship with Roxanne. She turned her gaze from Lucian and looked toward Roxanne. She was sniffling as she looked piteously at Roxanne, and tears were brimming in her reddened eyes. Her loud sniffling was very conspicuous in the noiseless classroom, and everyone turned to look at her and Roxanne. "I want Archie and Benny!" Estella cried out, pouting and heaving as she tried to control her tears. Everyone felt sorry for her and turned to look disapprovingly at Roxanne. "She's so blessed to be grouped with Mr. Farwell. Many of us would fight for that chance, and yet she wanted to switch. What's wrong with her? The kids got along so well with one another, but she insisted on breaking them apart. Can't she spare a thought for the kids?" Pippa was caught in the middle. She could not find a reason to refuse Roxanne's request, but at the same time, she was also wary of Lucian's reaction. The other parents started whispering in hushed tones at the unexpected turn of the event. Roxanne was not oblivious to Estella's anguish and the accusations from the other parents. For a moment, she nearly decided to take back her word after seeing how sad Estella was. However, she managed to steel herself, look away, and say, "Ms. Ward, if you have no objections, Ms. Clark and I will confirm the switch." "Mommy!" Benny anxiously tugged at her sleeve and pleaded. Initially, the boys had no issues with Roxanne's request for the switch. They reckoned Estella would still be able to see their mom anyway, even if they were in different groups. However, Estella's tears pained them, and they didn't want Roxanne to switch to another group anymore. There was a visible sense of helplessness in Roxanne as she looked at her boys. Estella wailed sorrowfully when she heard Roxanne insisting on the switch. She wanted to go to Roxanne, but Lucian held her back. Pippa was at a loss, caught between the tearful little girl and an adamant Roxanne. "Ms. Jarvis, as you can see, Estella will only do well with your boys," she voiced. Roxanne looked away from Estella and tried to block her cries from her mind. She was keenly aware that Sonia knew about the anniversary celebration. She trembled at the thought of the consequence if Sonia was to find out that she was going to act in a love story with Lucian and Estella. She didn't want Sonia to jeopardize her hard-earned opportunity to work with the Damaris family. Lucian threw a glance in Roxanne's direction. When he realized she was not going to change her mind, a displeased look flashed across his face. He stood up and announced, "I have no issue with the switch since Ms. Jarvis is reluctant to partner with us and insists on that. However, as you can see, Essie will suffer if she cannot be in a group with Archie and Benny." Upon seeing Estella crying her eyes out and Lucian leaving all of a sudden, Roxanne clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. "Ms. Jarvis," even Pippa was trying to speak up for Estella. Cassandra quickly got up and said anxiously, "I'm sorry, Ms. Jarvis, but I won't be changing teams anymore. You should go calm Essie down." Her eyes were filled with fear. "All I wanted was a chance to get closer to Lucian, but the arrangement ended up making Estella cry instead. If the Farwell family decides to pursue this matter, I'll definitely be blamed for it. Eventually, Roxanne clenched her teeth and lowered her gaze as she gave in to the pressure. She then walked up to Estella and said, "Stop crying, Essie. I won't change teams anymore, okay?" Estella was crying so hard that she couldn't stop sobbing as she looked up at Roxanne. Roxanne felt her heart ache when she saw Estella's face all covered in snot and tears. As she reached out to help wipe those tears, Estella simply stood there obediently and let her do it. Roxanne was still trying to think of a way to calm Estella down when Lucian's voice rang out from behind her. "As such, I seek your understanding that we'll have no choice but to withdraw from this year's performance." Emotionlessly, he gave a slight bow in apology and strode out of the classroom with a reluctant Estella. Estella was hyperventilating from the weeping and struggling violently against Lucian. It was a heart-rending sight, and all the parents turned shockingly toward Roxanne, hoping she would step up to salvage the situation. "You don't have to force yourself if you don't want to do this, Ms. Jarvis. Essie practically never attends class activities like this anyway." Roxanne's feelings of guilt intensified even further after hearing that. "I want Essie to get better. She's finally starting to adapt to being around her classmates, and yet, she got so upset because of me." With that in mind, Roxanne caressed Estella's chubby cheeks as she said, "I'm sorry, Essie. I take back what I said earlier, okay?" Estella nodded and let go of Lucian's hand before throwing herself into Roxanne's embrace. Roxanne felt her heart soften up even further when she held Estella in her arms. "Now that the grouping issue has been resolved, let us start discussing the change in the plot," Pippa suggested while breathing a sigh of relief. Everyone agreed and began discussing among themselves. Roxanne stood up and led Estella back toward her seat. Archie and Benny, who were sharing a chair, quickly got up and let Estella have it when they saw her coming. Estella smiled at them with her nose still red as she sat down next to Roxanne. Roxanne had a conflicted feeling in her heart as she watched Pippa, hoping that they could change the plot for Sleeping Beauty. "As you may have noticed, we have chosen fairy tales with different themes for this activity. The reason we chose these fairy tales was to help the kids understand the different relationships between people," Pippa explained with a friendly smile. She then glanced at Roxanne and Lucian as she added, "Romantic relationships are no exception." Roxanne felt her heart sink a little when she heard that. "As such, we do not plan on making any changes to the plots of these fairy tales. Is there any parent who objects to this decision?" Naturally, no one else had any objections. Roxanne was the only one with an awkward look on her face. Just like that, the meeting came to an end after a brief discussion. Pippa stood at the classroom door and waved goodbye at the parents as they left. Roxanne walked up to her with a concerned expression and asked, "Ms. Ward, are you sure you don't want to change the plot for Sleeping Beauty? I don't know if it's appropriate for children to witness that final scene." Pippa flashed her a reassuring smile as she replied, "Don't worry, Ms. Jarvis. The kids already know about this sort of thing. Besides, you're not really going to kiss in front of them. You'll be positioning yourselves to look like you're kissing." Pippa then looked behind her and asked, "I'm sure you'll offer your full cooperation, right, Mr. Farwell?" Roxanne tensed up when she heard that. "Of course," Lucian replied, his voice sounding like he was whispering right next to her ear. Roxanne lowered her gaze and stepped aside before turning around to look at him. "Don't worry, Ms. Jarvis. I'm not the kind of guy who would take advantage of others. Besides, you and I are both parents. There's no way we'd be doing anything inappropriate," Lucian said with a cold look on his face. "If they don't change the plot, then Lucian and I will have to share a kiss at the end of the story." She instinctively glanced at Lucian at the thought of that, only to meet his unfathomable gaze at the same time. The two of them locked eyes for a few seconds before Roxanne averted her gaze and tried to look natural. "Relax, Ms. Jarvis. It'll just be a bunch of kids watching the play," Pippa added. Unsure of what to say, Roxanne nodded with a forced smile. "Thank you for what you did earlier." "No need to thank me. I was just doing my job," Pippa replied casually with a chuckle. Roxanne then had a brief chat with her before leaving. She was about to open her car door when she heard Lucian's voice coming from behind her again. "Since you've agreed to work with me, you're not going to bring your personal emotions into the play, right, Ms. Jarvis?" Roxanne turned around and nodded calmly. "You may rest assured that I'll give the kindergarten my full cooperation, Mr. Farwell." She deliberately emphasized that she was only going along with the play as it was part of the kindergarten's activities. The look in Lucian's eyes turned gloomy when he heard that. "That's good to hear. I hope we will be able to work well together." Roxanne felt a little uneasy as she nodded in response. "Knowing this guy, he's not going to let me leave so easily. Fortunately, I've already prepared an excuse for myself." To her surprise, Lucian turned around and got into his car without saying a word. Roxanne froze in shock when she saw him start the car and drive off. "Ms. Jarvis," Cassandra called out to her. Roxanne snapped out of her daze and turned around. "I'm sorry for putting you in a tough spot earlier. I didn't know Mr. Farwell's daughter was so close with your kids," Cassandra said apologetically as she made her way over. Roxanne flashed her a faint smile in response. "It's all right. I agreed to change teams too." Feeling slightly relieved after hearing that, Cassandra asked, "What about Mr. Farwell?" Both of them knew full well what she was implying. Cassandra was the one who suggested the team change, so she was afraid that Lucian would get mad and come after her. The two kids were waiting for Roxanne by the time she got home that night. They ran up to her and stared cautiously at her face the moment she came in through the door. "What's the matter?" Roxanne asked with a confused frown. Benny exchanged glances with Archie as he asked in his usual adorable voice. "Are you unhappy, Mommy?" Roxanne felt confused. "What makes you say that?" "You requested for a change in teams earlier at school, but it didn't happen," Benny replied nervously with his lips pursed. Roxanne felt a little stressed when she recalled the stage play that she would be in. "I'm not upset, Benny. Now, be a good boy and go get ready for dinner." Still worried about her, the kids waited until she had taken her coat off before sitting down at the dining table. Roxanne saw a mountain of food on her plate when she came back from washing her hands. As such, she wanted Roxanne to help talk Lucian out of doing so. Roxanne was a little hesitant when she recalled Lucian's cold expression from earlier. "I don't think you have to worry about it. After all, the issue has been resolved," and Mr. Farwell isn't that petly of a person. However, Cassandra was still staring at her with a fearful and pleading look in her eyes. Eventually, Roxanne had no choice but to agree to her request. "All right, I promise I'll explain it to him properly. Thank you very much. Just let me know if you ever need my help with anything, okay? I'll do my best to assist you." Cassandra thanked her profusely while breathing a sigh of relief. Roxanne simply pursed her lips and smiled without saying anything. Archie and Benny were still topping her plate up with food like worker ants feeding their queen. "All right, that's enough. I'm not angry or anything, you two. I really do feel bad for Essie," she said with a chuckle as she ran forward to stop them. Seeing as the kids were still a little unconvinced, Roxanne flashed them a reassuring smile as she put some of the food back. "I can't finish all of this by myself, you know." The kids stopped trying to top her plate up, but still glanced at her worriedly from time to time. Not only did Roxanne fail to change teams, but Pippa had also stated that there would be no change in the plot of the stage play. They knew how much Roxanne wanted to stay away from Lucian, so they were worried that she only agreed to attend the activity because of them. Both Archie and Benny had spent the entire day blaming themselves for what had happened. Oblivious to their thoughts, Roxanne simply continued having dinner with them as usual. After dinner, she was about to take them out for a walk when her phone started ringing. Benny quickly fetched her phone for her, but the look on his face changed when he saw the name on the caller ID. Roxanne felt confused when she saw his sudden change in expression. It wasn't until she saw Lucian's name on the screen that she understood his reaction. "Why would Lucian be calling me at this hour?" After hesitating for a bit, she answered the call and asked, "What is it, Mr. Farwell?" Lucian's deep voice came on the other line. "The stage play takes place next week. When do you plan on rehearsing, Ms. Jarvis?" Roxanne felt her heart sink when she heard him mention the stage play. "Oh, right, I forgot we'll have to rehearse it. This means I'll be spending more time with Lucian. This is the first time our kids will be participating in a stage play, Ms. Jarvis. I'm sure you'd want it to be a smooth experience for them, right?" Lucian pressed on. Naturally, Roxanne couldn't bring herself to deny that statement. "When do you wish to start rehearsing, Mr. Farwell?" "You're a lot busier than I am, so I'll try my best to accommodate your schedule instead," she said after a brief pause. "We can start tomorrow after our kids get off school. We can do it at your place if you don't mind," Lucian replied. It would be late at night by the time they finished rehearsing, so Lucian wanted to save Roxanne the trouble of rushing home with her kids. "Since there's no escaping the rehearsal, it doesn't matter where we do it." With that in mind, Roxanne agreed to his arrangement. The next day, Roxanne was so busy working at the research institute that it was already 7 in the evening when she got home. Upon entering the house, she froze in surprise when she saw Lucian standing in the living room. "I remember agreeing to rehearse the stage play after the kids got off school, but I didn't think he'd just let himself in without informing me beforehand." "Mommy!" Archie and Benny called out to her excitedly when they realized she was home. They then gave Estella's hand a gentle tug, prompting her to turn around. Estella had a disappointed expression on her face at first, but her eyes lit up the moment she saw Roxanne. "Ms. Jarvis!" Estella shouted as she ran over and threw herself at Roxanne before Archie and Benny could. Suppressing her discomfort, Roxanne patted Estella on the head and asked, "When did you come over, Essie?" "She came home together with us." Archie and Benny replied before Estella could. Noticing the frown on Roxanne's face, they continued explaining, "Essie really wanted to see you, so we let her come home with us, but she got a little unhappy because of how late you came home, Mommy." Estella was so happy to see her that she didn't even hear what Archie and Benny were saying. Roxanne's heart softened up when she saw Estella staring at her like that. "I'm sorry to have kept you waiting because of work, Essie." Estella shook her head. She was happy as long as she got to see Roxanne. She only got unhappy earlier because she thought Roxanne was avoiding her again. After a few minutes of watching them have fun, Lucian made his way over to them with a blank look on his face. The smile on Roxanne's face was frozen in place when she noticed him approaching. She then met his gaze with a distant look in her eyes. "Mr. Farwell?" Lucian nodded slightly and asked, "Essie came looking for you in a hurry right after school was over, so she hasn't eaten anything yet. Could you please prepare a set of utensils for her?" Naturally, Roxanne wouldn't refuse a request like that. Feeling excited that Roxanne was going to let Estella join them for dinner, Archie and Benny grabbed Estella's hand and ran into the dining room. Roxanne simply shook her head and smiled when she saw their reaction. "I've never seen them run toward the dining room so eagerly." "Hey, must be really happy, hey?" The smile on her face slowly vanished when she recalled that Lucian was still standing next to her. Just like that, the living room fell into an awkward silence. Even after she changed into her slippers, Lucian was still standing there with an emotionless look on his face. Roxanne then glanced at the kids and nodded at him before making her way into the dining room. The kids stopped playing when they saw her coming and just sat there staring at her. Roxanne tensed up the moment their gazes met. She then retracted her gaze and tried to act like she was looking at something else in his direction. "Hurry up and dig in. The food is getting cold," Lisa urged them with a smile. Having been snapped out of her daze, Roxanne nodded absent-mindedly and began topping the kids' plates up with food. Estella simply stared at her food and refused to eat it. "What's wrong, Essie? Do you not like the food?" Roxanne asked in confusion. "I don't recall her being a picky eater, though." Estella cautiously glanced at the living room before saying in an adorable voice, "Daddy." Roxanne's expression froze as she knew what Estella was going to say. "Daddy hasn't eaten either. Can he join us?" Estella asked with an expectant look in her eyes. Roxanne let out a helpless sigh when she heard that. "I figured Lucian probably hadn't eaten when I heard Estella had come over immediately after school. Since he was already here, I thought of inviting him to the table to show him the most basic of hospitality." Noticing that Archie and Benny had reserved a seat for her next to Estella, Roxanne sat down beside her. She then instinctively glanced at the living room and saw Lucian sitting on the couch all by himself. Because he had his side facing them, she couldn't get a clear view of his facial expression. As if he had detected her gaze, Lucian turned his head and looked in her direction. However, he only asked if I could let Estella join us for dinner, so I couldn't really bring myself to invite him. Besides, he didn't seem like he wanted to join us anyway. "Ms. Jarvis," Estella tugged at her shirt sleeve. Roxanne let out a silent sigh and patted her on the head as she said, "Sorry, I didn't know. I'll go invite your daddy right now." She then turned toward Lisa and said, "Lisa, bring us another set of utensils." Lisa nodded and went off to fetch the utensils from the kitchen while Roxanne made her way to the living room. Lucian was scrolling through his phone on the couch when she walked up to him. Unsure if he was genuinely unaware of her presence or deliberately waiting for her, Roxanne said, "Essie told me you haven't eaten." Lucian then looked up at her and replied coldly, "Yet. What the heck is with that attitude of his? It's obvious that he was deliberately waiting for my invitation." Roxanne thought to herself with a frustrated frown. Since she had already initiated the conversation, she had no choice but to go through with it and asked reluctantly, "If you don't mind, how about joining us for dinner?" Given how cold her tone was, anyone else would have known she was simply being polite and turned her invitation down. Lucian, however, arched an eyebrow at her and said, "I don't mind at all, but I'm not sure if you would, Ms. Jarvis." Roxanne glared at him as she forced the words out of her mouth. "No, I don't." Lucian then put his phone away and got up from the couch. "In that case, I shall graciously accept your invitation." Roxanne nodded and went back to the dining room. As if his plan had worked perfectly, Lucian was smiling gleefully as he walked behind her. While Roxanne was oblivious to his expression, Archie and Benny saw it clearly from the dining table and exchanged surprised glances in response. While having dinner, Roxanne realized Lisa had arranged for Lucian to be seated right in front of her. As Lucian's gaze would fall upon her from time to time, Roxanne felt extremely uncomfortable throughout the entire meal. After what seemed like forever, they were finally done having dinner. Lisa then cleaned up the table while Roxanne and the others headed over to the living room to rehearse the stage play. Although they had yet to finalize the roles for the play, Lucian and Roxanne became obvious choices for the prince and princess due to the kissing scene. The kids then stared blankly at Roxanne as they were unsure of the roles they should take up. After going through the script, Roxanne gave it some thought before saying hesitantly, "Essie can play the role of the witch." Estella nodded obediently in response. "What about us, Mommy?" Archie and Benny asked in unison while staring at her excitedly. They were curious as they didn't remember finding any roles in Sleeping Beauty that suited the two of them. Roxanne paused briefly before replying with a chuckle, "You two can be the fairies." Archie and Benny went wide-eyed with shock upon hearing that. "What? But we're boys. How will we act as fairies?" Roxanne burst out laughing when she saw their reaction. "All right, let's change the story up a little. You two can act as your blessings." Idea of fairy. Archie and Benny breathed sighs of relief as they accepted their roles. Having assigned the roles to the kids, Roxanne stood up and glanced at Lucian, who was standing beside her. Who would have thought Daddy was such a cunning guy? He simply stared coldly at her in response. The smile on Roxanne's face slowly faded as she said, "It seems we will have to take up extra roles for this play. Not only will we be playing as the prince and princess, but also as the king and queen." Lucian nodded in agreement without any hesitation, much to Roxanne's relief. "This is the script. Take a look at your lines and try to memorize them as best you can," she said while handing the kids her phone. The kids then huddled together as they read through the script on the phone. Roxanne turned to look at Lucian and said, "We should go through the script as well. Could you search one up on your phone, Mr. Farwell?" Lucian whipped out his phone and searched for a script on the spot. As Roxanne leaned in closer to read the script, the two of them were so near to each other that they could hear each other breathing. Despite Roxanne's best efforts at staying focused on the script, she found herself getting distracted by him a lot. Lucian, on the other hand, was completely calm and focused as he went through the script. Roxanne was blushing so hard that she barely remembered anything even after going through the entire script. She was snapped out of her dazed state when Lucian's voice rang in her ears. "Do you want to read it again?" Roxanne shook her head and stepped away from him as she blurted, "No, I'm good. You can go through it again if you need to, Mr. Farwell." Lucian arched an eyebrow at her in amusement when he saw her reddened face. "Good thing I've already gone through the script a few times before. Also, I don't really have many lines since my character will be sleeping for the most part." Roxanne breathed a sigh of relief at the thought of that. "We're done, Mommy. Can we start rehearsing now?" the kids asked excitedly after finishing their script. Roxanne nodded absent-mindedly and instinctively glanced at Lucian in response. Playing the part of the king, Lucian welcomed Archie and Benny by saying, "Welcome to the party, you adorable elves." Although he had gotten his lines correct, his tone sounded so cold that it didn't match the mood at all. As a result, Archie and Benny found themselves unable to get into character. Roxanne shot Lucian a helpless look and said, "This is a fairy tale meant for children, Mr. Farwell. You'll scare the kids off like that." Unsure of what she meant, Lucian simply frowned at her in confusion. "You need to put more emotion into your lines. We just had a baby, so you should be more happy about it," Roxanne explained. Those words had barely left her mouth when she realized how wrong that sounded. The king and queen are having a celebration for their princess, but you don't sound like you're celebrating at all. She quickly explained with her face all red. Lucian frowned and stared at her in silence. "Try to recall how you felt when Essie was born," Roxanne reminded him patiently. The look in Lucian's eyes turned slightly gloomy as he glanced at Estella. "Her condition was terrible when I got her, so I felt nothing but anger and heartache. There was no excitement whatsoever." With that in mind, he stared at Roxanne and wondered how she felt when she gave birth to Estella back then. Thinking he still didn't understand what she meant, Roxanne tried to give him some more guidance. Having detected her gaze, Lucian put his phone away and nodded at her in response, indicating that he was ready as well. "How did you talk to your employees at Farwell Group during company parties?" "Just like that," Lucian replied with a straight face. "In that case, I'll say this line instead." Roxanne had wanted to tell Lucian to avoid speaking if possible but held herself back when she recalled that he would have lots of lines as the prince. Lucian arched an eyebrow at her in confusion. Roxanne let out an awkward chuckle in response. "Never mind, let's just forget this part for now." Lucian nodded without saying a word. Roxanne then got into character and smiled at Archie and Benny as she continued. "Welcome to the party, you adorable elves." The two kids got into character as well and smiled back at her. "Thank you for the invitation, Your Majesty. Please allow us to give the princess our blessings." Archie and Benny then danced about with their magic wands as they chanted a few magic words. Roxanne was about to thank them when Estella entered the scene as the witch. "You guys sure are bold," she shouted while glaring at them. Roxanne nearly burst out laughing when she saw how cute Estella looked. She then pretended to back away in fear, only to be pulled into Lucian's embrace. "Who are you?" he asked, showing some emotion this time. Estella then replied with her lines according to the script. Meanwhile, Roxanne's mind went blank as she froze up in Lucian's arms. She was so shocked by his sudden hug that she forgot they were rehearsing and instinctively broke free from his grip. Her response was so sudden that Estella stopped reciting her lines halfway through and stared at her in confusion. "What's wrong, Mommy?" Benny asked worriedly. It wasn't until she heard Benny's voice that Roxanne regained her senses and recalled that they were rehearsing. As for Lucian's actions, it was needed by the script. Realizing that fact, the apologetic Roxanne smiled at the children. "I'm sorry for spacing out. Please continue." After exchanging curious glances, the children obediently agreed. Meanwhile, Lucian, who was looking at Roxanne, had an epiphany that brought a grim expression to his face. Feeling guilty to the extent of not daring to look in his direction, Roxanne naturally didn't notice the change in him. As the rehearsal continued, they had to change their roles. Roxanne, playing the princess after she was all grown up, did so with much aplomb. It wasn't until the prince appeared while she was asleep that her frustrations began to build. Taking on the role of the prince, Lucian would either be too aloof or not angry enough when he faced Estella. Naturally, his performance caused Roxanne to worry. "Mr. Farwell, you'll scare the children this way. Mr. Farwell, you're facing a witch, not Essie. You have to look more fierce." Lucian was speechless. After a few rounds, the tired Estella gave her father a wry look, her face filled with annoyance. Under his daughter's glare, Lucian couldn't resist feeling helpless about it. Despite his desire to act well, he was hampered by his inherently calm temperament, making it difficult for him to express the right emotion. Without saying a word, both father and daughter stood still and glared at each other. Watching the scene, Roxanne couldn't help but feel amused. Despite knowing Lucian for very long, this was the first time she saw him being bad at something when she saw Estella on the brink of tears. Roxanne stroked her head with a smile. "Essie, why don't you take a break? I'll take over your role in the scene with your daddy." After nodding with a pitiful expression, Estella headed to where the brothers were, her head hanging low. Roxanne subsequently took her place opposite Lucian. When she saw the expression on Lucian's face, Roxanne, too, was exasperated. "Mr. Farwell, you're here to rescue someone, not kill them, so don't look so cold." Furrowing his brows, Lucian took her advice and tried to adjust his expression accordingly. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, it just wouldn't come out right. Sighing softly, Roxanne reached out to press the corner of his lips. "Relax. Don't be so tense." No sooner had she spoken than both of them froze. Roxanne, with an awkward expression, retracted her hand and returned to her spot. As for Lucian, he maintained the smile that Roxanne had drawn on his lips. Despite that, his brows were knitted, making for a really weird sight. When the three children saw Lucian and Roxanne's reactions, all of them were equally confounded. After a moment of deathly silence, Roxanne was the first to regain her composure. Checking the time as if nothing had happened, she smiled at the children. "It's getting late. Since you have school tomorrow, that will be all for today." Given how much intimacy had occurred between them during the entire period, Roxanne was too embarrassed to face Lucian anymore. Fortunately, the children were cooperative and readily agreed with what she said. When she didn't hear Lucian's answer after a while, Roxanne, steeling herself, looked up at him. "Mr. Farwell, let's continue next time." Noticing the panic on her face and recalling the sensation of her touch, Lucian nodded as an unknown emotion flickered through his eyes. "All right." Just as he spoke, he went to Estella's side to hold her hand. Nonetheless, Estella gave Roxanne a reluctant look. "Ms. Jarvis, are we going to continue tomorrow?" Estella wanted to see her every day. In the end, Roxanne answered in a vague manner that indicated her agreement. The next evening, Roxanne planned to leave work early to pick the children up from school. It had been a long time since she did so, as she had been trying to avoid Lucian. Now that meeting him was inevitable, there was no need to hide from him. Holding that thought, Roxanne gave Lisa a call, letting the latter know that she would pick up the children herself. Lisa agreed at once. Upon ending the call, Roxanne threw herself back into work. Even though the Damaris family's research institute was still in the planning stage, a lot of details still needed to be confirmed with Roxanne's research institute. Furthermore, Roxanne, not wanting to disappoint the Damaris family, had to make sure that her preparations were comprehensive enough. Meanwhile, Colby had finished his work in the research facility and came over to provide her with a progress report. The moment he stepped in, he sat quietly opposite her when he saw how engrossed she was in work, hoping to speak to her when she was done. It wasn't until a long while later that Roxanne shifted her attention away from the screen. At the sight of Colby, she was stunned. "Dr. Galloway, why are you here? When did you come in?" Colby grinned. "I just got here. Since you were busy, I didn't want to disrupt your work." Roxanne gave him a slight nod. "What is it? How are things at the research facility?" Colby replied, "I was just going to talk to you about it. The projects over the last few days have been going smoothly. Therefore, you can prepare for our collaboration with the Damaris family without worry." Colby had barely finished when he added in admiration, "Everyone in the research institute is talking about the upcoming collaboration. They are looking forward to it and feel grateful to you for securing such an opportunity." Roxanne got up to pour him some coffee before smiling humbly at his words. "The credit for securing the collaboration goes to everyone here. After all, they are the ones who have kept this place running. Regardless of how smart I am, there's no way the Damaris family chose to work with us solely on my account." Roxanne was certain that the Damaris family had conducted a thorough background check on their research institute before choosing them as their partner. After thanking her upon receiving his drink, Colby inquired about the progress of her preparations. "How are things coming along at your end?" Roxanne casually turned her screen around in order to show him. Even though the collaboration details had been decided, the Damaris family's research institute wasn't on track yet. Thus, Roxanne could only spend the last few days identifying the direction of the family's research and reading up on the latest information in an effort to prepare ahead of time. After going through it, Colby knitted his brows. This is a field that our research institute has not explored before. Thus, I'm not sure if we can meet the Damaris family's expectations. Roxanne curled her lips into a smile. That's the reason why I'm preparing for it as much as possible. Furthermore, if the collaboration goes well, our research institute will be able to expand the fields that we're involved in, which will be extremely beneficial to our future development. Colby responded with a thoughtful nod. I understand. I'll make sure everyone is well prepared. In the midst of their discussion, there was a sudden knock on the door. When Roxanne opened it, she saw one of the researchers, dressed in a lab coat, standing at the door. When he saw Roxanne, the man reported awkwardly. Dr. Jarvis, excuse me for troubling you before you leave, but we have encountered a problem with our experiment. Meanwhile, class had ended at the kindergarten. With most of the students gone, only the 3 children were left waiting at the school field. They were in a particularly good mood as they were looking forward to the rehearsal later, while Archie and Benny would chat occasionally. Estella sat obediently by the side with a smile on her adorable face. Why isn't Ms. Lane here yet? Benny began to grow curious when he noticed the sky turning dark. Ms. Lane has always arrived early, so why is she late today? Despite furrowing his brows, Archie reassured his brother. Perhaps she's occupied with something. Let's just wait for a while longer. At that moment, Lucian strode through the kindergarten entrance and was greeted by the sight of the 3 children sitting in a row. Daddy! Estella, the first to see him, waved at Lucian. After hurrying up to her, Lucian knitted his brows while staring at the brothers. Over the last few days, Lisa had been picking up the boys since Roxanne was avoiding Lucian. Thus, they were usually gone by the time he arrived. What's going on today? Where's Ms. Lane? Lucian asked in a gentle tone. Propping their chins up with a hand, the boys were equally clueless. We don't know. Archie says that Ms. Lane might be busy, Benny explained in his squeaky voice. Frowning, Lucian checked the time and suggested, I'll send you home. The boys exchanged a glance. Can you help us take a look at it? Roxanne agreed without hesitation while Colby, too, followed them back to the research facility. Even though Benny was tempted, Archie shook his head with an expressionless face. The look in his eyes was just as distant as Roxanne's. You don't have to. We'll just wait for Ms. Lane. Otherwise, she'll worry if she doesn't see us here. Lucian replied at once. I'll give your mommy a call and tell her to inform Ms. Lane. With the boys still appearing reluctant, Lucian added, I'm going to send Essie over to your house for the rehearsal anyway. Estella, too, urged them, let's go together. Daddy will let Ms. Lane know. Since it's already late, let's leave quickly. As she spoke, she tugged the boys' bags with a look of anticipation. However, the brothers merely hugged their bags tighter. Their resentment for Lucian couldn't be any more obvious. Estella then turned around to look to her father for help. After giving her head a reassuring stroke, Lucian returned his attention to the boys who were sitting on the bench. If you continue to wait here, Ms. Ward will also have to wait with you. Have you thought about that? At that, Pippa's first reaction was to say that it was fine. However, the look on Lucian's face caused her to swallow her words in fear. Instead, she wore an awkward expression in front of the children. The brothers stared at their teacher before thinking about their mother. Identical conflicted expressions dominated their faces. At that moment, Estella rubbed her stomach pitifully with a pout. "I'm hungry." Lucian raised his brows slightly. "We'll have to wait for the brothers." Upon hearing his words, the boys finally got off the bench with their bags and trudged up to Lucian's side. After motioning for Estella to hold the brothers' hands, Lucian took his leave from Pippa before leading them out of the kindergarten. Once all of them got into the car, Lucian started the engine and drove toward Roxanne's home. By the time Roxanne came out of the research facility, it was already past 7 in the evening. Checking the time, she felt as if she had forgotten something. In the midst of her trying to recall what it was, she received a call from Lisa, which she picked up with a frown. "Ms. Jarvis, are you on your way?" Lisa's voice rang out the moment she answered. Her words had Roxanne instantly thinking of the boys. She replied at once, "I forgot about them. I'm heading over right away." Ending the call in a hurry, she sped toward the kindergarten. Upon her arrival, she was greeted by the closed gate at its entrance. Evidently, the brothers were no longer inside. Overwhelmed by panic, Roxanne froze momentarily before it occurred to her to give Pippa a call. "Mr. Farwell has picked Archie and Benny up. Didn't he inform you about it?" Pippa asked curiously. "Lucian picked them up." Roxanne breathed a sigh of relief. After thanking Pippa, she ended the call with mixed emotions. While staring at the empty kindergarten, she was filled with guilt and self-blame. She had grown so used to Lisa collecting the boys that she ended up allowing such an important matter to slip her mind. Luckily, Lucian was there. Suddenly, her ringing phone jolted her out of her thoughts. Since the 3 children were sitting at the back, Estella would occasionally speak to the boys. Before long, all of them dropped their guard and began to play in the back. The sound of the children arguing caused Lucian's expression to soften slightly, and there was even a hint of amusement in his eyes. After getting a grip of herself, she glanced at the caller ID. Seeing Lucian's name, she figured that it must be about the children. Hence, she answered without hesitation, "When are you coming back?" When Lucian's magnetic voice rang out, Roxanne was stunned by his words. It took her a few seconds to realize he was likely waiting at her house, as they were due to rehearse for the play. It was just that his words drove her imagination wild, for he made it sound as if they were a family. Suppressing the turbulent emotions within her, Roxanne plainly replied, "I'm on my way. Thanks for picking Archie and Benny up." After grunting in acknowledgement, Lucian reminded casually, "Be careful while driving. The kids are playing, so there's nothing to worry about." As another strange sensation crept into her heart, Roxanne mumbled a response before ending the call. "Lucian's tone just makes it all too easy for me to get carried away with my thoughts." After lingering at the kindergarten entrance to calm her nerves, Roxanne departed for her mansion. The moment she stepped into the house, she was greeted by the sight of Lucian working on the couch. The children were nowhere to be seen. "Ms. Jarvis, what held you up tonight?" Lisa welcomed her with a concerned tone. Roxanne, in an apologetic tone, explained, I had wanted to go get them but was delayed by work." After acknowledging her answer, Lisa threw Lucian a glance and added, "Luckily, they didn't have to wait as Mr. Farwell sent them home." Just as Roxanne trailed Lisa's gaze, she saw Lucian wrapping up his work and approaching them after keeping his phone. "Thank you." As Lucian came up to her, Roxanne averted her gaze and thanked him softly. Lucian, with a cursory nod, suggested in his deep voice, "Since you're back, you should have your dinner first as the children have been complaining about being hungry." In the brightly lit backyard, the boys were kicking a ball around while Estella, holding up her skirt, ambled behind them. Even though she didn't manage to get a kick in, she smiled widely the entire time. "Mommy." Benny, who had just kicked the ball in the direction of the door, was given a fright when he suddenly saw Roxanne emerge from the house. The moment she stepped out, Roxanne was stunned to see the ball flying straight at her face. Just when it was inches away from her, she felt a hand reach out from behind and pull her to the side. In the next second, the ball brushed past her body before falling onto the ground. As Lucian appeared from behind Roxanne, he looked at the dumbstruck children and instructed in a deep voice, "Come back in for dinner." It wasn't until they gradually gathered their wits that they hurried up to Roxanne's side. "Mommy, I'm sorry for scaring you. Are you all right?" Benny apologized meekly. Roxanne gave his hair a reassuring tousle. "I'm fine, but you have to be more careful next time." Just as she spoke, something else occurred to her. Giving Estella an amused yet helpless look, she reprimanded the brothers. "How could you play ball with Essie? She's wearing a dress, for goodness sake. What if she had fallen?" Having heard Roxanne's words, the boys exchanged glances before scratching their noses to hide their guilt. Even though Lisa has already prepared dinner, they still insisted on waiting for you. Roxanne's heart melted as she pursed her lips and nodded. In response to her agreement, Lucian turned around and headed to the backyard. Roxanne followed him, knowing that the children were likely there. Suddenly, Estella's high-pitched voice rang out. "They didn't ask me. It was I who wanted to play with them." Roxanne's Rose jumped in surprise, for she didn't expect Estella to speak out on behalf of the brothers. Nonetheless, it was still dangerous for her to be running wild with the boys while wearing a dress. On top of that, she barely had any energy left given how hungry she was. It was one thing for the children to be playful but another for Lucian not to stop them. With that thought in mind, Roxanne subconsciously threw Lucian an accusatory glance. As if he could sense the attention she placed on him, Lucian explained without turning around, "Essie rarely gets the opportunity to run. See if she's having fun, there's no reason to stop her." Roxanne had no further comment after hearing his response. She then took the children to wash their hands before leading them into the dining room. As the food had already gotten cold, Lisa reheated them. Considering how famished they were, the boys began wolfing down their food once everyone took their seats at the table. The innocent Estella, after observing them, picked up her cutlery and ate just as aggressively, watching the scene unfold. Roxanne just couldn't hold back her laughter. She then patted her boys on their backs. "Slow down. You're setting a bad example for Essie." After giving Estella a glance, the boys burst out in laughter before complying. "Mommy, why did you come back so late today?" Benny asked curiously halfway through dinner. She gave his head an apologetic tussle. I'm sorry. I did plan to pick you up today and even told Lisa about it. Unfortunately, something unexpected came up at work, causing me to forget. Upon hearing her reason, the boys gave her an understanding nod. It's all right. However, the next time you want to pick us up, please let us know. Roxanne's brows furrowed in reflex. Right as she was about to say something, Benny, as if he could read her mind, changed his request. You don't have to do it every day, just until the anniversary celebration will do. In response to Benny backing down, Roxanne sighed in relief and agreed, all right. Her answer filled the children's faces with elation. Meanwhile, displeasure flashed across Lucian's face when he noticed Benny wavering in his stance. He was cognizant of why Benny did it and the reason why Roxanne could readily agree. Since they were going to be rehearsing for the play, there was no point in her avoiding him for the time being. Once the anniversary celebration was over, she would then stay as far away from him as she could, given that Roxanne had come back late. It was already well past 8 by the time dinner was done. With limited time left, they could only rush through the rehearsal before it was time for Lucian to take Estella home. When she was reluctant to leave, Roxanne coaxed her with a smile, "Be a good girl, Essie. I'll be collecting all of you from school tomorrow, and we can have fun then, all right?" Only after hearing Roxanne's reassurances did Estella nod in compliance. Just as Roxanne looked up to bid Lucian goodbye, his phone suddenly rang. "Otherwise, we'll worry about Ms. Lane." Feeling as if her heart had melted, Roxanne agreed with a smile. At that moment, Benny added, "To make up for letting us wait for such a long time, why don't you pick us up every day from now on? How about that?" Holding her tongue tactfully, she watched as Lucian answered the call with an emotionless expression. As it was related to work, Lucian stopped to inform Roxanne before heading off to the balcony to take it, leaving her alone with the 3 children in the living room. When the kids saw Lucian going off to answer his call, their eyes lit up at the opportunity to play. Thus, the 3 of them ran off before Roxanne could even say a word. Roxanne, smiling in resignation, went along by playing hide and seek with them. As their house wasn't big, Archie and Benny would always end up hiding in the same few places. Once Roxanne found them with little effort, the 3 of them set off in search of Estella mommy. Benny gave Roxanne's sleeve a gentle tug. Trailing the trajectory of his gaze, Roxanne saw a dainty pair of legs underneath the curtain. In fact, it was still trying to wiggle its way toward the corner. Unaware that she had been discovered and clueless about how obvious her hiding spot was, Estella was still trying to get into a better location. After watching Estella's adorable movements, Roxanne instinctively looked at the man on the balcony. Lucian, with his back facing them, was still on the phone. Looks like it will be a while before he finishes. Retracting her gaze, Roxanne gestured at Archie and Benny to be quiet so that they could continue the game with Estella for a little longer. The boys, aware of their mother's intention, played along by calling out Estella's name while walking back and forth in the house. As the figure behind the curtain moved a little, Roxanne could hear the sound of a faint giggle. Nonetheless, it was quickly suppressed by Estella. When she saw how happy the little girl was, Roxanne treaded silently toward her. "I found you!" Upon reaching Estella's side, she gently pulled the curtain away. Estella was momentarily stunned before running away and laughing at the same time. At the sight of Estella throwing herself into Lucian's arms, Roxanne stopped awkwardly and held back the two boys running behind her. "Daddy!" Unaware of the change in Roxanne's mood, Estella tugged ecstatically at Lucian's sleeve. "Let's play hide and seek for a while before going home." Lowering his head to gaze at Estella, Lucian then shifted his attention to Roxanne with an indiscernible look in his eyes. When she met his gaze, Roxanne felt a sudden sense of guilt. She had just reprimanded the brothers for running wildly with Estella. But now, she was the one doing it instead. After an awkward silence, Lucian remarked in a deep voice, "It's getting late. I'll be taking Essie home now." He had barely finished when he turned toward Estella and said, "We have to go now, but we'll come back again tomorrow." Despite puffing her cheeks up to express her unwillingness, Estella recognized that she had had a lot of fun that evening already. After a brief hesitation, she demonstrated her acquiescence by holding her father's hand. When she reached the mansion's door with Lucian, Estella turned around and waved at Roxanne with a reluctant expression. Tickled by Estella's response, Roxanne calmly followed behind her. "I'm going to catch you now." At that moment, Archie and Benny joined in the fray by surrounding Estella. Left with no way out, Estella fled toward the balcony in her panic. Meanwhile, Lucian had just ended his call and was oblivious to what was going on. No sooner had he turned around than he saw his daughter crashing into him while panting heavily. As if by instinct, he managed to get a hold of her. "Bye, Ms. Jarvis." "Bye, Archie, Benny." Roxanne, too, bid the little girl farewell. "See you tomorrow." All of a sudden, Lucian looked down at Estella and surprised everyone with his next words. "Let's go. We'll play hide and seek again with Ms. Jarvis tomorrow." The mere mention of the game caused Estella to smile so happily that her eyes couldn't be seen. As for Roxanne, the sound of Lucian's voice caused her to blush faintly. After watching his car disappear into the distance, Roxanne led the boys back into the mansion. The next evening, she went to school to pick them up just as she promised. When she arrived at the kindergarten entrance, she saw the three of them standing in front of Pippa, unable to hear the exchange between them. All she could see was Estella bursting into gleeful laughter. Upon her arrival, the children looked at her in unison, their faces glowing with joy. The heartwarming sight melted Roxanne's heart as she hurried over to their side. "Mommy! Ms. Jarvis!" The children called out to her in their squeaky voices. After giving their heads an affectionate pat each, Roxanne's attention fell on Estella. "Essie, is your daddy not here yet?" Estella nodded, as Lucian would usually arrive later. Pondering for a moment, Roxanne then suggested with a smile, "In that case, do you want to come home with me first?" Estella nodded in agreement without giving it a second thought. In fact, she even reached out to hold Roxanne's sleeve of her own volition. Roxanne then held Estella's hand before bidding goodbye to Pippa and herding the children into her car. As the children climbed into the back seat obediently, they felt as if they had returned to the time when Estella was living with them. Meanwhile, before Roxanne had the opportunity to answer, Lucian furrowed his brows and added grimly, "If it's not convenient, I'll send Caden over." Regaining her senses, Roxanne calmed herself down and replied, "It's all right. Essie is already in my car. I was just about to give you a call to tell you." Her words cased the tension on his face. "Thanks for that. Anyway, I have to go off now." Before Roxanne could even react, Lucian ended the call. All she could hear was the call end tone. After spacing out for a few seconds, Roxanne put her phone aside. Nonetheless, Lucian's voice continued to reverberate in her mind. She was unsure if she was overthinking it, but it felt as if he was warming up to her after spending the last 2 days rehearsing together. In fact, she would sometimes be mired in the illusion that they were a family, and that was the exact sensation she felt a moment ago. Unfortunately, the thought of Sonia alone caused her to snap back into reality. The only difference was that she could now interact with them normally, injecting further dynamism into their relationship. Consequently, the car, filled with their excited voices, felt especially lively. When Roxanne saw how they were fooling around in the back seat through the rear-view mirror, a gentle smile emerged on her face. As she took her phone to give Lucian a call, it rang with a call from him instead. Roxanne proceeded to answer. "Are you picking Archie and Benny up today? I'm tied up with something right now. If you can, please bring Essie along to your place." Lucian's deep voice rang out the moment she answered. Even though his words were consistent with her intention, she had an indescribable feeling after hearing what he said. "Mommy." Curious as to why she hadn't yet driven off, the children checked on her. Roxanne, gradually gathering her thoughts, mumbled a response before starting the drive back home. By the time they arrived, the dinner Lisa prepared was already waiting for them. When Lisa only saw the 4 of them, she was surprised. "Where's Mr. Farwell?" Used to having dinner together with him over the last 2 days, Lisa felt out of sorts when she only saw Estella and not Lucian. When she looked behind them to check, Lucian was still nowhere to be seen. Lisa then gave Roxanne a quizzical look as if he was a member of their family. Noting Lisa's strange expression, Roxanne knitted her brows but quickly realized that the niggling sensation she felt wasn't imagined. At the same time, for some inexplicable reason, her mood plummeted. "I is tied up with work." Lisa nodded in acknowledgement. "In that case, should we wait for him, or shall we start first?" Roxanne fell into deep thought again. Lisa's question sparked a glint in Estella's eyes as she turned around and gave Roxanne a pitiful look. "I want Daddy." She had barely spoken when she gave Roxanne's sleeve a gentle tug and whined, "Daddy doesn't eat when he's busy." After hearing Estella's words, Roxanne had no choice but to nod at Lisa. "Let's wait for a while then." Lisa bobbed her head in acknowledgement. Roxanne, with conflicted emotions, ushered the children to wash their hands. "Mommy, are we waiting for Mr. Farwell to have dinner together?" Benny asked while the water was running down his hands. He had heard what Roxanne promised Estella but was also aware that she was trying to avoid Lucian. In the end, Roxanne mumbled an affirmative. Sensing his mother's reluctance, Benny tilted his head in confusion. Since Mommy doesn't like Daddy, why did she agree to wait for him to have dinner? At the sight of her father, Estella ran up to Lucian's side and pointed to the untouched food on the table. "You're finally here. All of us are famished." As Lucian followed the trajectory of Estella's gaze, he saw Archie and Benny at the dining table, looking at him while supporting their heads with one hand. Their eyes still reflected the resentment they felt for him. As for the 5 sets of dinnerware on the table, they remained untouched. Evidently, everyone was waiting for him to have dinner together. Realizing that fact, Lucian felt a complex range of emotions as he glanced at Roxanne, who had just come up to his side. When their eyes met, she briefly froze before explaining by reflex, "Estella auntie to wait for you." Raising his brows slightly, Lucian looked down at his daughter, who nodded with a gleeful grin as if she was taking credit for it. Oblivious to what was going through Benny's mind, she waited for them to finish washing their hands before leading them out of the bathroom. It was then that they heard a knock on the door. Everyone could guess that Lucian had arrived. With that thought in mind, Roxanne put on an aloof expression as she opened the door. When she did, she was greeted by the sight of Lucian in a suit and a neatly tied tie. He looked as if he had just come out of a meeting and was still exuding an authoritative air. Roxanne, after being briefly stunned by his appearance, stepped aside to make way. "Come in." Lucian gave her a slight nod before brushing past her to enter the living room. In response, Lucian stroked her head and apologized to Roxanne and the boys, "I'm sorry for holding you up. I didn't realize you were waiting for me to have dinner." Roxanne pursed her lips. "It's no big deal. Now that you're here, let's dig in and then continue with our rehearsal." After giving her a nod, Lucian washed his hands before taking a seat at the table opposite her. When dinner was over, everyone began rehearsing. After practicing a few times, Roxanne had come to accept Lucian's lack of talent in acting. Therefore, she simply went along with the flow. As for the 3 children, their acting skills were better than she had expected. Initially, she was worried that they wouldn't even be fluent with their lines. However, they impressed her not just with their eloquence but also with their convincing expressions. Once rehearsal was over, the confused Estella tilted her head as she stared at the 2 adults. Noticing how she was looking at them, Roxanne crouched by her side. "Essie, what is it? Is there a problem?" Knitting her brows, Estella asked hesitantly, "Oh, Ms. Jarvis, does Sleeping Beauty sleep till the end? I remember that she was awoken by a kiss from the prince. However, the rehearsal always ends after the prince defeats the witch." Roxanne didn't have to wait for Estella to finish her sentence before she understood what the girl was going to say. She interrupted with a smile, "Of course not." A baffled look emerged on Estella's face. "But the rehearsal always stops here." Having heard Estella's question, Archie and Benny came over, for they too were equally curious. Faced with the children's confounded expressions, Roxanne furrowed her brows, at a sudden loss for words. Even though Pippa had mentioned that they only needed to look like they were kissing and no physical contact was needed, Roxanne still wanted to avoid any intimacy with Lucian. As a result, she had been neglecting that last scene on purpose. To be honest, she hadn't expected the children to notice. Unable to find the words to explain, Roxanne turned to Lucian for help. However, she saw a strange look on his face instead. When his gaze met hers, his expression became indifferent once more. He then said something that disheartened her further. "That's true. I, too, am curious about it. Ms. Jarvis, why do you always skip the last scene?" Isn't that where the soul of the story lies? The children nodded in agreement. Stumped, Roxanne took a while to regain her senses before walking to Lucian's side and whispering. Ms. Ward said that we can just pretend to kiss without making contact. All the more reason why we should practice it. Lucian cocked his brows while giving her a thoughtful look. Having heard Lucian's words, the frowning Roxanne felt a strong sense of resistance within her. Lucian's deep voice rang out again. If we don't rehearse it, please don't accuse me of taking advantage of you when I kiss you by mistake. In that moment, Roxanne couldn't believe her ears. Nevertheless, she did find the scenario Lucian had conjured up to be entirely possible. Besides, neither of us are actors by profession. If we don't practice, how would we know where we should stand to make the kiss realistic? Lucian, who could sense her wavering, pressed on calmly, causing her to feel ambivalent about the matter. She admitted that he had a point. However, given that the anniversary celebration was still a few days away, she would have to be in close proximity to him for consecutive days if they were to rehearse the scene. In the midst of her hesitation, Estella's squeaky voice piped up, "Why are we rehearsing everything but this scene?" She proceeded to give Roxanne a quizzical yet innocent look. When she saw the confusion in Estella's eyes, Roxanne sighed in resignation. "Fine. We'll run through it too." After giving in, she threw Lucian a glance. Nevertheless, all she saw was a detached expression. As if the comment he made was solely for the sake of the rehearsal. Shifting her gaze away, Roxanne prayed that it was just her imagination that was running wild, given that every scene before the kiss had been rehearsed multiple times. Roxanne had no choice but to jump right into the kissing scene. The children subsequently led her to the couch, wanting her to lie down. However, when Roxanne didn't move a muscle, Estella urged her, "Ms. Jarvis, lie down quickly." Roxanne looked at the children's excited faces and then at the waiting Lucian, still feeling torn over the matter. It took her a while before she finally felt mentally prepared for it and lay down. The children smartly made way for Lucian. A few seconds passed before he walked over to the couch. Supporting himself with his hand on the back of the furniture, he leaned in to look at the woman lying on it. Roxanne had shut her eyes, though there was a slight furrow between her brows. From the way her eyelashes trembled, she looked as if she was going to open her eyes at any moment. At the sight of her nervousness, Lucian cocked a brow and sniggered quietly to himself. The children, who were all watching by the side, were shocked to see the amusement on Lucian's face. During their rehearsal over the past few days, they kept hearing Roxanne complain that Lucian didn't have any emotions at all. But from what they were seeing now, they realized that Roxanne's words were a far cry from reality. While Roxanne lay on the couch with her eyes closed, it was so quiet that she could hear a pin drop. All she could feel was Lucian's breath bearing down upon her. As he continued to approach, Roxanne's hands clenched into fists while her brows slowly knitted together tightly. All of a sudden, Lucian's breath stopped at an angle with no further movement. When Roxanne opened her eyes in curiosity, she was greeted by his annoyed face. "Ms. Jarvis, there's no need to be so nervous. I will keep my word not to take advantage of you." Lucian's voice sounded a little cold, causing Roxanne to be stunned. The same time, the children chimed in. "Mommy, Sleeping Beauty doesn't frown." "Ms. Jarvis, your expression cannot change because you're supposed to be asleep. After being reminded by the children and glancing at the displeased-looking Lucian, Roxanne lowered her gaze self-consciously. Close your eyes. Lucian gave her another instruction. Roxanne's eyelids fluttered before she complied. She became nervous when she felt the man's warm breath near her once more but tried to stay calm by digging her nails into her palms. The little ones watched as Lucian got closer and closer to Roxanne. Right as his lips were about to touch hers, Lucian froze for a moment. Then he tilted his head slightly, creating the illusion of a kiss. Roxanne was aware of how Lucian froze and moved his head away. She held her breath and waited for quite some time, but the man did not step away from her. It was so quiet that she could hear Lucian's breathing. Roxanne could not help but knit her brows. When she cautiously opened her eyes, she saw the man in front of her. His gorgeous face left her in a daze for a few seconds. When she came to her senses, she pressed her palm against his chest to stop him from advancing. A simple kiss will do. Don't forget to straighten up once you do so. A sleeping beauty is supposed to wake up. Lucian's eyes darkened while he scrutinized her face. Upon hearing that, the man gradually straightened his back and gave Roxanne a baffling smirk. Thanks for your reminder, Ms. Jarvis. Roxanne lowered her eyes and stood up. Let's call it a day. This should be the ending scene for the play. She then got up and walked to the three children, leaving Lucian alone on the couch. Lucian was pleased with the development. As such, he was not bothered by how Roxanne once again distanced herself from him. Upon hearing what Roxanne said, Lucian got up from the couch, walked to Estella, and said in a deep voice, I'll see you tomorrow then. He lowered his eyes and reminded Estella, Essie, say goodbye to Ms. Jarvis and the boys. Estella did not throw a tantrum because she knew she would be coming tomorrow. The little girl waved her hand to bid them farewell. Goodbye, Ms. Jarvis. See you tomorrow, Archie and Benny. Roxanne grinned at Estella and walked them to the door. After sending them off, she brought Archie and Benny back to their room. On the way back to the Farwell residence, Estella sat in the passenger seat and looked at her father in anticipation. Daddy, do you think Ms. Jarvis will like us? Lucian froze at Estella's question. He merely wanted to use the anniversary celebration to draw Roxanne closer to him and had not thought of anything beyond that. Thus, he was surprised that Estella had developed that train of thought. Getting Roxanne to like Essie might be a piece of cake. But getting her to like me? Lucian could not help but smirk and mock himself when he recalled all the incidents 6 years ago. She left without a trace 6 years ago. It won't be easy to win her heart over again. Upon noticing his hesitation, Estella clenched her fists and asked anxiously, Will Ms. Jarvis start avoiding us again? Lucian lifted his eyes to look at the little girl and answered in a solemn voice, It all depends on what you're capable of. Roxanne had always had a soft spot for Estella. Lucian always knew he was the only reason she maintained a distance from his daughter. When she heard that answer, Estella pressed her lips and raised her fist. Okay. I'll try my best. After several days of rehearsal, it was finally Friday. When Roxanne went to pick the little ones up in the evening, she saw the children carrying a pile of clothes in their arms. Excitement was written all over their faces. Look, Mommy! These are our costumes! Benny showed her the costumes as Roxanne walked toward him. Roxanne nodded gently in response and took over the outfits from the boys. Meanwhile, Estella was also waiting at one side while carrying 2 pairs of costumes, one for her and one for Lucian. Estella had always been physically weak. That was why she seemed to have difficulties carrying the costumes and a bag on her back. Once Roxanne took over the costumes from Benny and Archie, the boys ran to her and helped her with the clothes. Estella gratefully passed the garments to the boys and thanked them. The 3 children then lined up in front of Roxanne, waiting for her to lead them to the car. In the last couple of days, Roxanne would always take them back together. Estella thought it would be the same for today. Seeing how excited the children were, Roxanne leaned forward, stroked Estella's head, and said awkwardly, "Since the rehearsal is tomorrow, we won't be rehearsing today anymore." That answer took Estella by surprise. Feeling disappointed, the little girl lowered her head. Since there would be no rehearsal today, Estella would not be able to go to Roxanne's place to play with the boys. Roxanne's heart melted when she noticed how upset Estella was. She looked at the girl and said softly, "But Essie, you can wait for your daddy in our car." With that said, she straightened her back and reached out her hand to Estella. Though still upset, Estella grabbed Roxanne's hand and climbed into her car. Lucian arrived after a short wait. Roxanne noticed the man walking toward Pippa. After finding out where Estella was, he walked in their direction. "Daddy!" Estella opened the car door and greeted Lucian. Lucian responded with a curt nod. When he was about to ask Roxanne why she did not bring the children home, Estella muttered softly, "Ms. Jarvis said there'll be no rehearsal today." Lucian frowned and looked at the woman in the driver's seat. Roxanne explained casually, "They shouldn't be rehearsing anymore since the performance is tomorrow. I hope they can get enough rest today and not be anxious over tomorrow's performance." Lucian had no choice but to agree with her. Despite that, Estella was unhappy with the arrangement as she wanted to stay with Roxanne. She was afraid that after the performance, Roxanne might avoid them like how she had done previously. Estella could not help but look at Roxanne with her puppy dog eyes. Roxanne had her back to Estella, so she did not notice the expression on the little girl's face. She just carried on saying, "Here's Essie. You can take her home now. I should go home with my kids now too." Suddenly, she heard the man's voice from behind her. "Please let Essie stay a night at your place." Roxanne was taken aback by the request. "I won't be able to help her with the makeup and costumes since the performance is tomorrow. I would be relieved if you could help them with all the preparations at home because I'm afraid everyone will be extremely busy at the kindergarten," Lucian explained in a calm voice. Upon hearing his justification, Roxanne hesitated for a while but finally agreed with the arrangement. After knowing that she could sleep over at Roxanne's place, Estella broke into a wide smile. Estella had not slept over for quite some time, so she was thrilled when she stepped into the house and started running around with the 2 boys. They only stopped chasing each other when Roxanne called them over for dinner. After dinner, Roxanne played with the children for a while before asking them to try on their costumes. The kindergarten was indeed an elite establishment. It looked like they had put a lot of effort into the costumes for the anniversary celebration. The little ones instantly transformed into their characters when they wore the garments. Archie and Benny both had the same costumes but came in different colors, one in blue and one in green. Not only were they given garments that came with a pair of wings, but they also received a pair of pointy ears. Despite not having any makeup, the two boys already looked like a pair of elves after putting on the costumes. On the other hand, Estella was given a long, black witch's dress, a black hat, and a magic wand. Yet, she looked so out of place when she put on the costume because of the innocent look on her face. It was as if an angel had accidentally worn a witch's outfit. The children were amused to see each other in their respective costumes. They tilted their heads and urged Roxanne, "Where's your costume, Mommy?" They looked as if they had just walked out of a fairy tale when they had the costumes on. The little ones could not wait to see what Roxanne would look like when she put on hers. After grabbing Lucian's costume and handing it to him, they bid each other farewell and drove home. Roxanne smiled faintly and went to her bedroom with her outfit. Not long after, she walked out of the room. Brimming with excitement, the children looked over when they heard the sound of the door opening. To their confusion, they noticed Roxanne was still wearing the same clothes as earlier. "The costume fits me well." Upon noticing the expressions on their faces, Roxanne grinned, "I'll only wear the costume tomorrow." "All right, kids. It's time for bed. Change back to your clothes now." Archie, Benny, and Estella reluctantly ran their fingers over their costumes and went to their rooms. When Roxanne was about to take Estella to the shower after helping her remove her outfit, the girl popped a question. "I wonder what Daddy's costume is?" Upon hearing that, Roxanne paused and kept mum for a few seconds. She then gave Estella a smile and said, "It will be a prince's costume, of course. I'm sure you'll see what he looks like tomorrow." Estella nodded, but she seemed a little distracted. Roxanne could not tell what was on the girl's mind, but she decided not to pry and took her straight to the bathroom. During the shower, Roxanne told her the Sleeping Beauty story. Estella raised a doubt after listening to the story. "Does Sleeping Beauty like the prince, Ms. Jarvis?" That question rendered Roxanne speechless. According to the fairy tale, Sleeping Beauty lived with the prince after being woken up by his kiss. However, it did not clarify anything about their relationship. She had no clue if Sleeping Beauty was fond of the prince. While Roxanne was still trying to think of an answer, Estella asked her another question, "How about you, Ms. Jarvis? Do you like Daddy?" Estella kept bombarding her with burning questions to the point where Roxanne could not react to them. Estella was going to say something else, but Roxanne interrupted her, "It's late. We have to get up early tomorrow. Let's hurry up and wash up and go to bed." It was obvious that Roxanne didn't want to continue with the topic. Estella's eyes turned dark, but she listened to Roxanne obediently and said nothing else. She slept with Roxanne. As she rarely had the chance to sleep with Roxanne, she slept soundly that night. Roxanne, however, couldn't help but recall Estella's innocent question. What did Lucian do wrong? There was only one answer that she could think of to that question. Other than the fact that he didn't like her. He didn't seem to have done anything else to hurt her. However, that alone was enough to make Roxanne keep a distance from him. Besides, Sonia and Aubrey had also been keeping an eye on her. Roxanne did not sleep well that night as thoughts flooded her mind. and she woke up very early the next day. Meanwhile, Estella was still snuggled next to Roxanne, sleeping soundly. Roxanne's gaze softened and her heart ached as she looked at Estella by her side. "Can you stop running away from us, Ms. Jarvis?" Estella's voice echoed in the bathroom. "I like you very much, but you don't seem to like Daddy. What did Daddy do wrong?" Roxanne stayed silent for quite some time before answering hesitantly, "No, he didn't do anything wrong." "Then why are you avoiding us?" Estella insisted on getting to the bottom of the matter. Roxanne responded with a cursory grin. "I'm not avoiding anyone. I was just caught up with work. Besides, I don't hate your daddy, we've been getting along well in the last few days, haven't we?" She didn't know why Estella was so dependent on her right after their first meeting. At one point, she felt as if she had done something wrong to Estella because she couldn't be hard on Estella no matter what. "Ms. Jarvis." Just as Roxanne was lost in her thoughts, Estella woke up in a daze. Roxanne returned to her senses and stretched out her hand to touch Estella's tiny little face. "You're awake?" Estella nodded in response, struggling to open her sleepy eyes. Roxanne couldn't help but laugh at the sight of that. She had wanted to let Estella sleep for a little longer, but when she thought about helping the children to change into their costumes and do their makeup, she had no choice but to wake Estella up. Estella obediently followed Roxanne into the bathroom to wash up. After that, Roxanne gave Estella simple makeup. Then she applied some heavier colors to Estella's face and drew some patterns at the corner of Estella's eyes, which made the latter look more like a little witch. Once that was completed, Roxanne braided Estella's curly hair into a thick braid and secured it at the back of Estella's head before helping her to put on the witch's black hat. "Okay. Let's wake Archie and Benny up." Roxanne brought Estella with her to knock on Archie and Benny's door. Archie and Benny were already awake and had already changed into their costumes. When they opened the door and saw her in front of them, they were astonished. "Essie looks like a real witch." Estella shyly moved to Roxanne's side when the two boys complimented her. Roxanne touched Estella's soft face and urged Archie and Benny. "It's your turn now. We're running out of time. We must be quick." Archie and Benny quickly agreed and followed Roxanne to do their makeup. After helping Archie and Benny with their makeup, Roxanne did simple makeup on herself and changed into her costume. Then she had a quick breakfast before rushing toward the kindergarten with the three children. When they arrived, Lucian's car was already stopped in front of the kindergarten entrance. Lucian got out of his car calmly when he saw them getting out of the vehicle. Instead of doing his makeup, Lucian had only changed into his costume and styled his hair. There was also a brilliant-looking sword attached to the waist of his costume, which made him look like a prince from a fairy tale. Archie, Benny, and Estella were dumbfounded by his appearance. Choice but to wake Estella up. Estella obediently followed Roxanne into the bathroom to wash up. After that, Roxanne gave Estella simple makeup. Then she applied some heavier colors to Estella's face and drew some patterns at the corner of Estella's eyes, which made the latter look more like a little witch. Once that was completed, Roxanne braided Estella's curly hair into a thick braid and secured it at the back of Estella's head before helping her to put on the witch's black hat. "Okay. Let's wake Archie and Benny up." Roxanne brought Estella with her to knock on Archie and Benny's door. Archie and Benny were already awake and had already changed into their costume when they opened the door and saw her in front of them. They were astonished. "Essie looks like a real witch." Estella shyly moved to Roxanne's side when the two boys complimented her. Roxanne touched Estella's soft face and urged Archie and Benny, "It's your turn and see, we're running out of time. We must be quick." Archie and Benny quickly agreed and followed Roxanne to do their makeup. After helping Archie and Benny with their makeup, Roxanne did simple make-up on herself and changed into her costume. Then she had a quick breakfast before rushing toward the kindergarten with the three children. When they arrived, Lucian's car was already stopped in front of the kindergarten entrance. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.